Hey everybody, it's Alison Heikkila. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to do some magical stenciling together, and I'm really excited. So I've got the spiral stencil from Hero Arts. This is beautiful, pretty intricate. I really like it. And I also have the Floral Imprints stamps from Hero Arts. I haven't used either of these before. And I've got the Lindy's Magicals Haunted Halloween set. We're going to use Witch's Potion Purple, Freaky Frankenlime, and Tainted Love Teal. So I sprayed the back of my spiral stencil with some pixie spray. It's not a super delicate one, even though it's pretty intricate. The pieces don't really move around, but because we're going to be doing a wet technique on here, I want to make sure that that stencil stays put. And it does lift a little bit. I could have probably used a little bit more, but it works out in the end. So I have some Canson mixed media paper, and I pulled out those three colors, and I spritzed the panel with some water, just a little bit, not too much. We're going to add some more water later. And I'm dipping my fan brush into the Freaky Frankenlime. I believe that this set is still available in a couple of spots. I don't know if it's available on the Lindy site, but I will be sure to link it below. This set is beautiful. It is not just for Halloween. You'll see these colors and they're just amazing. I've got a coupon code below in the description box, so make sure that you take a look at that and use it if you decide to get anything from Lindy's. They've got some awesome stuff. So I'm just going back and forth between the colors and dipping, and I'm making sure to kind of wipe off my brush with my hand before I dip it into the next powder, just because I don't want to transfer one color into the other pot. I think I was pretty good about doing that. I might have done it once, but you won't be able to tell. There are some little granulation bits that kind of build up in areas that have more powder than liquid. So you'll see that I'll add more water to those areas. I pointed it out a few seconds ago. And once I lift this up, actually before I lift this up, I'm going to wind up using a brush to kind of spread that out. You can see that teal area there. Excuse my dog barking if you can hear her. I'm starting to kind of move that color around because there are some spots that don't really have a whole lot of color, and that one area has a ton of color. So I'm just pulling it out and spreading it around so that I don't have to get more powder out, because really there's plenty of color all over this panel already. And I'm just spreading it around and just kind of evening it out without it being obviously even. You can see just how many colors are in each of these powders, even though I only used 3. And I don't know if you noticed the pots when they were sitting on the side of my workspace. They look completely different when they're dry from when they're wet. So if you decide to get any and you get them home and you're like, I don't know about this, I'm telling you, once you hit it with some water, they transform, and it is truly magical. So now I had to let it dry, and that is not easy for me. I didn't let it dry completely because I wanted to dry it down with my heat tool, and I was pretty impatient. I wanted to get this card going. So I let it dry for just a few minutes, and I took the stencil and flipped it over onto another piece of cardstock, and I'm going to just press it down just after I wipe up my space, because there is color everywhere. Normally I would use that color, but for the sake of the video I didn't. So I grabbed some just scrap paper, just copy paper, and I pushed, I rubbed all over the back of that stencil just to see if I could get any ink to transfer, and I did. I'll probably wind up spraying it with something, I don't know, we'll see eventually. But here's the panel, and you could see that there are a lot of areas that are wet. There is still some granulation there, but I don't really mind it. So I dried it off with a heat tool, and seriously, look at that shine. That whole panel is shiny, and it's stunning. That teal, ugh, breathtaking. Even the purple, actually all of the colors, I love them all. So now I'm trimming the panel down so that it is 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm careful to remove the areas that don't necessarily have as much definition as some of the others. You could see that, you don't really see that stencil design in some spots, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't need to be perfect. I kind of like that blurriness that's happening, and I do wind up hiding it a little bit later on. So even though I dried this down completely, I did use my anti-static powder tool on there because I'm going to wind up embossing the silhouette stamp, that I chose. So I picked out my stamp. And again, I haven't used this set before. It's so pretty. This is one of the newer sets from Hero Arts. It's really beautiful. I want to try it with like rainbow stamping, like using multiple colors on the stamp at once, and that's going to look pretty cool. So I'm just trying to figure out my placement. I kind of figured that I wanted it to be in that lower right corner, but I wanted to make sure that that was really where I wanted it to go. So I've got it in place now, and I'm going to stamp it with some VersaMark ink. And I lied. VersaFine Clair Nocturne. That's right, because I wanted to use a dark embossing powder, and if I missed any areas with the powder for whatever reason, I wanted to make sure that it was still black. So that's why I went with the Nocturne. And I did have to ink it up a couple of times. That center area of the focal flower wasn't quite inking enough, and that was totally my fault. I think I need to get a re-inker from my Clair because I use it so often, right? So I'm cleaning off my stamp, getting rid of the misty, getting that out of the way, moving everything around because the desk is getting crowded. I have some Pearl Luster embossing powder from Stampendous. Not sure if this is still available. If you have any type of gunmetal embossing powder, you can use that, or you can just go with your basic black. Black would be great, but I really wanted to keep that shine going because the rest of the card is so shiny. So it's a lovely subtle metallic. So now we're going to heat this bad boy up. This is one of my favorite things to do. It always has been, it always will be. I love watching embossing powder melt. Oh, look at that. So cool. Now you might be saying, it's okay, but it's a little tricky to see. There's a lot going on. I'm not sure if that's working. So I'm going to kind of tie everything together by using a black strip and one of the strips that I had cut off of that panel originally when I trimmed it down. So the black strip is going to ground this other strip, which is going to tie into the embossed flowers, and then I'm going to add a sentiment on a black piece of cardstock as well. And that's going to give you kind of a, it's like the rule of three. It's pleasing to the eye, visual triangles. So we'll have three very obvious areas that have black on them, and it's just going to make it more pleasing to the eye. And that strip is getting placed on top of one of the areas that has a little less definition from the stencil. So we're kind of masking that a little bit, kind of hiding the fact that that stencil got a little blurred. Again, that's just me. That's not the stencil. I just didn't use enough pixie spray on there, and I used a whole lot of water. So now I'm pulling the Best Wishes stamp, and I've got some black cardstock. Again, I'm going to go in with the anti-static powder tool just to make sure that I don't make a hot mess with my embossing powder. And I have some detail white embossing powder on the side, and I'm just going to kind of free stamp it with some VersaMark. Now we have the VersaMark ink out. See that? I knew I used it. I'm going to stamp it. I know it's a little tricky to see the black cardstock on the black glass mat, but I was being very careful to line it up as straight as I could. There is my embossing powder. It's a detail white. You can use any white you have. I decided to go with white because I wanted to pull out the white that was left behind from where the stencil was. And you guys, I left the card base white again. I don't know what's happening with me lately, but when I'm making these videos, I keep leaving my card bases white. It's so unusual to me. I don't know what's happening. But in this scenario, I thought that it really needed to be white. I didn't want to add more color. And there's the sentiment. Now I'm going to trim that bad boy down with my Tim Holtz trimmer. Love this little guillotine. Excuse me. It could be guillotine. It could be guillotine. You could say it either way. I started to cut it at the top so that you guys would be able to see it better, but I realized that there was that little piece on the edge and it was keeping me from lining it up straight. So I had to bring it down. My camera rig is right where the guillotine is, so it was a little tricky to do that, but I wanted to make sure I was in frame for all of you so you could see what I was doing. I needed to trim just that top a little bit. It was a little too low for my liking. I decided to not mat it, and here I'm trying to figure out where exactly I want to put it, but I really liked the green that was happening at the top, and there was some good definition there, so I opted to go down where that purple is, and although there's some really great shine there, I wanted to, again, mask off the area that had a little less of the stencil defined, so I opted to go down low. So here I'm just applying the panel with some Barely Arts glue, and then I'm going to stick my sentiment on there, right in that little spot that I just pointed out. A little bit more glue, a little bit more stick, and I'm just adjusting, and I'm trying to get that little bit of teal shimmer to show, but it's just not going to work without impeding on the floral. So I decided to leave it as is, and that is the card. So I hope that you've enjoyed this today. I love making cards like this. I love to play with patterns and designs with things that may not necessarily seem as though they work together, things that are super intricate. These florals are intricate, that stencil is intricate, and even though it seems like it might be a little too much, I like trying to figure out ways to make them work together. So that's what we did here today, and I tell you, if you haven't played with those Lindy's Magicals, you have got to give them a go. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Be well, stay safe, peace out.